looking good, you caught my eye. Love your style, clean and precise. Cadell. A difference you can tell. Cadell. Style unparalleled.
We good?
Yeah, we're good.
Bro.
Hey,
What's happening, man?
what's going on, James?
Chilling.
Nice to meet you.
I appreciate the opportunity, man. I always try to take every opportunity I can get. So anytime it's it's an honor and a pleasure to be involved in anything.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you showing up. Yeah. So let me tell the people exactly what it is that we're talking about and what it is that they're looking at. So this is Modern Man Talks. I'm your host, Solomon. I'm fortunate to be here with James May. And Modern Man Talks, what we're doing is we're talking to gentlemen who are in the 100,000 plus category. Only 15% of the American population makes $100,000 up to $150,000. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to gentlemen who are in that category, who make that type of money, so that way they can tell us, everybody else, how to reach that status that we want to reach, that financial literacy of well-being that 100,000 offers us to get into. So enough about exactly what that is. And once again, we'll also be practical on this show. So everything that we'll tell you will be like things that you can actually do. Won't be like philosophies and thoughts that we guessing about.
100%.
These are actually things that you could do. So if we say that, hey, you got $50 can get you $150, we'll tell you how to actually use the $50 to get the $150. Not give you some hypothesis. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I'm gonna flip it over. We're gonna start our conversation up with James, and just tell me a little bit about yourself, a little background.
All right. So I'm originally from Cobb County. I'm 36 years old, I think. So I was born in 1986, coming up on 37. I grew up fairly lower to middle class. Growing up for me was a little bit challenging. I was constantly in trouble, kind of just trying to figure out, I guess, my place, and how I fit in the world. When I was 7, my parents had another child, which is my sister. Me and her had a great relationship, and growing up, kind of bounced around schools, not really because of moving, but new schools were being built in West Cobb County. There's a lot of students. So every single time I went from elementary school to middle school to high school, it was new, right? I never really had the same core group of people. Still kept in contact with a lot of people, but it was challenging because trying to constantly almost rebrand yourself every time you go to a new school definitely presents its challenges. Some good, some bad.
Right.
It was a little bit of a difficult road, but I graduated high school in 2005. Tried to do the college route. I guess I can also just put it out there. I'm a recovering heroin and cocaine addict.
Okay.
So I've been sober now almost 9 years, completely sober. And so it was a challenging road. I tried college, wasn't for me. Basically failed out. Constantly plagiarizing, got caught for that a lot, but I was always kind of a smooth talker and could kind of talk my way out of a lot of situations, a lot of legal trouble. And then 2014, when I got sober, is kind of when I took a turn and utilized a lot of the things that I learned along the way that were kind of negative things that impacted my life negatively. I just kind of turned them around and used those for positive and stuck to role models. And now I'm here now. I've got 2 companies. It's in the medical field, so we do drug and alcohol and mental health treatment. Okay. So we have a location in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, and we also have a location in Kennesaw. And we are working on our 3rd location in Cartersville, which is going to be a primary mental health psychiatric inpatient unit.
Okay.
About a couple months out from getting that started. I also sell cologne. I sell shoe. I mean, I pretty much do a little bit of everything,
The
man.
whole gambit of,
yeah.
of entrepreneurship and self-madeness.
Yeah. I mean, if I can, you know, I've never been the type of person that's like, hey, you know, if it's $1 or if it's $100 or if it's $100,000 or if it's $1 million,
Right.
like, you know, I'm going to chase it. And part of that's just growing up, not having a ton, right? A lot of love growing up, but not a lot of money. Right. And so, you know, I just kind of, man, I hustle, man. I just hustle.
Just speaking about growing up a little bit, I know you're saying that you went back and forth from different schools and whatnot, but how much of a role did your parents actually play in your financial development and the way that you think about money?
I would say where I'm at today, not a lot. Mm-hmm. So my dad's disabled. He was disabled probably when I was in high school. He got hurt at work. He worked in a warehouse for a pharmaceutical company. And, you know, he's got his hobbies, and my mom babysat kids growing up. So there was always kids around me in the home. She actually ran a child daycare out of our house. So once that wasn't working for her and my dad was disabled, my mom kind of stepped up and was like, hey, it's time for me to, like, you know, get a real job. And not to say that child daycare out of the home isn't a real job, but, you know, providing benefits and things like that, things that the family needs, because my sister was still pretty young at the time. She, you know, just kind of worked her way up. She started at actually like a chicken company doing human resources. Okay. And has kind of moved her way up. I say the biggest person that kind of taught me the most would be like my grandfather. You know, he was an executive for Ace Hardware for like 50 years. Okay. So he taught me a lot of really important things. Now, at the time, I didn't really know what I was learning.
Exactly.
Right. It was a hindsight kind of moment where, you know, as I would get involved, once I, you know, got myself straightened out and started a business myself, it was little things that I would pick up when I'd be in certain moments where I would be like, oh, this is what they were trying to teach me then, right? And that's I'd say primarily my whole life. Excuse me. There's not a lot that I learn in the moment, but it's when I get into a situation
that you can
always
recall.
Yes.
Right. Can you give us an example of one of the things that your granddad might have taught you that you were able to recall?
One of the things was like investments, IRAs and things like that. So a lot of my trouble that I go back to, I had a side business where I sold things that weren't legal.
Right, I got you.
And so I used to always kind of look at certain things like, you know, rappers and all these things that they kind of portray out there. And I'd be like, oh, if I have like $100,000 in cash, like I'm set. Right. And like, if you really think about it, $100,000 in cash isn't a lot. Right. So one thing that my grandfather taught me was like, hey, like assets is where you go. Right. Correct. Because you can leverage your assets to get more capital to grow these things. And if you have a good idea, you don't have to give away 50% of your business. You can just leverage an asset to get money from the bank at a 5% loan. Whereas like if you bring in an investor, you might have to give up 20, 30, 40, 50% of your business. Correct. And then that kills you. Correct. Right. So little things like that. I mean, there was definitely times when I started my business, when I started my first business, I actually sold my shoe collection at the time. This was in 2014, I believe. And that was like the one thing that I didn't want to do, right? And I was like, oh, but you know, these shoes, man, they mean so much. And I remember like everybody used to always tell me, man, just sell your shoes, man, get rid of your shoes. Like you can't wear them anymore because you're in, you know, a certain situation. I was actually living at like a jail transition ministry, like homeless shelter almost, right? Up in Jasper, Georgia. And I was there for a year, and it was just kind of like, man, shoes, you know? And I know, especially in today's age, it's like shoes are everything. Right. Right? These things are, but you get to a certain point, you can buy whatever shoe you want.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And you can pay resale, and it don't matter. You know what I mean? So it's like certain situations like that definitely resonated from him. And even my parents to a certain extent. they would kind of like teach me about, debt and taking on debt, and, it's not smart. And even though they took on a lot of debt and still have debt, it was like one of those things where I was like, man, I just, with the exception of a mortgage,
Right.
debt's not for me. It's just, it'll drown you.
Right. It will. Right.
So that's just a couple little examples, I guess, that probably stick out to me the most.
Oh, that was some great practical examples. Let me ask you, in your opinion, what would you, what about 100,000 would signify financial literacy to you?
I think it's, I guess for me, like $100,000 used to seem so out of reach, right? Because I guess, 10, 15 years ago, $100,000, you make $100,000 a year.
That was good money.
It's good money.
It was great money, right?
And I'll say this, it's still good money today.
Yep.
It's not that it's not attainable, but I would always look at it from a cash perspective, right? So I'd be like, oh, if I had 10 stacks of like 10,000 each,
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
Like how rappers show it, I'd be
Right.
like, oh man, like I'm set, and then I could do this and flip that, and all these like little things would go off in my head. And then when I got $100,000, I was like, dang, this ain't gonna last.
Right.
Because as you make more money, your lifestyle increases, and then, especially in business, not a lot of people teach you this, but the more money you make, the more it costs you to keep it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's one of the challenging things. So you always got to continue to raise the bar, right? And that's just something I've always really tried to do, is raise it.
Tell us a little bit more about, I mean, not super in depth, but just give us like a little hint of what you just said. Like, a lot of people don't know that. A lot of young men, young women who try to get into the business aspect, they feel like once they make their, let's just take a round number. They make $10,000 a month for the business. And let's just assume that, it costs $5,000 to continue with your inventory or whatnot. Tell us a little bit more about how they should start thinking or looking at the business when they make more money, because that money has to translate to other things that the business needs.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So, it specifically like in my business, right? And just to preface, I didn't want to just create an income stream.
Gotcha.
And like create a job for myself. I really wanted to build a business. Okay. So like in terms of like scaling my business, right? So I think when I first started, I took a $20,000 investment, and then in my first year, I made $100,000. And I thought I had made it. And I was like, okay, this is great. But then with that came more staff and more people. And in my business, it's, it's a patient revenue,
Gotcha.
Right? So I'm not traditionally selling a good, right? I'm providing a service in which people pay for the service. Well, I'm not a doctor.
Gotcha.
I'm not a therapist. I'm just business-minded guy,
Gotcha.
right? So I have to hire therapists, and then I have to get a fax machine to communicate with the insurance company. And so internet, you want to have fast internet, because anything that could get in the way or delay kind of messes you up. And then hiring more staff, and then medical supplies gets expensive, and drug screening. So like in the grand scheme of things, you can make the same percentage of profit, but not the same amount of money.
I got you.
You know what I mean? And so I kind of had to think about it like, okay, I really want to grow this to be a 40, 50, $100 million business, right? But I can't sit there and just focus on $100,000 all day.
Right.
Like I have to spend $100,000 to make $500,000.
Gotcha.
I have to spend $500,000 to make $1 million, right? And so like that's really difficult whenever you don't have a lot of money, because you're like, oh man, I'm making great money. I want to go buy a new car. I want to go buy a new watch. Like I want to go parlay with the homies.
Right.
Like I want to go to nice dinners. Like I want to always do these things, and it's like sometimes a sacrifice that you have to make. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No,
right,
you
but,
are.
okay.
You are giving us the goods.
Yeah.
You are answering this question. Yes, you are. Continue
It's
on.
all about the sacrifice.
Right.
And then here's the other reality. Every year, the IRS coming.
Right.
And they want something.
Yes.
And you might have paid, you might have outdone yourself based on like your first quarter's earnings. And so like each time you estimate your taxes, they're going to go off like last year, or they're going to go, hey, this is your estimated tax. And you get to April,
Right.
and the IRS is like, we need 1.2.
Right.
And you're like, man, I have, I got $2 million in the bank. Now that just ate up all this operating cash, And so there's a lot of different variables, I think. It's definitely multi-layered. It just kind of depends on what business you're in. Because if I take the cologne business, for instance, my margins on the cologne is not big.
Right. That's true.
But last year, I think I sold almost $500,000 worth of cologne.
Wow.
In a year.
Wow.
And that was personally not even counting the drop ship. I mean, I probably sold, with drop shipping and everything, I probably sold about $1 million worth of cologne.
Wow.
Maybe not quite. I had to run the numbers, but it's a lot of cologne.
Right.
I sell a lot of cologne. Now the margins are like, maybe 15%, 20%. But still, you sell $1 million worth of cologne, that's $200,000.
That's good money,
you
right?
know? And so just constantly reinvesting and buying things, not knowing if I'm going to sell it. Like I might buy $20,000 worth of cologne.
Right.
I might sit on it for 3 months.
Right.
But put this into perspective. I put $20,000 into the stock market and I try to sit on it for 3 months. I lost money.
You lost money.
I lost money. So it's like taking that money instead of, everybody thinks like stock market.
Right.
Sometimes goods and services where it's at,
That's true. We got to shift gears just a little bit. So I remember earlier in the conversation that you said that, back in the day, or maybe about 5 years ago, 100,000 would have been great. But now 100,000 is a little bit less than what it is. It's still good money, but it's a little bit less. Can you tell us like what type of sacrifices you have to make with 100,000, like on your monthly expenses, like with family and bills and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of, you mean like sacrifices, things that I have to like give up?
Right.
You don't get to spend a lot of time with family. The Sundays of going and doing, things that, seem fun, and you're just chilling and your phone's not ringing, and, I miss out on a lot of those things. Birthday parties, trips with friends. There's a lot of things that I had to sacrifice. I don't live, I live a great life, and I do vacation a little bit now because I've gotten to a position in my business that it's a lot more stable. Okay. And I've hired some really great leaders and invested a lot into my team to make sure that they can run it. But, I'll speak to this. When I first started my business, I wasn't making terrible money, but date nights with me and my wife, my wife now, we were just dating at the time. It was 4 for $4 at Wendy's.
Okay.
Right. Dead serious. And she'll tell you, she always tells that story of like, we didn't know what we were going to do. Right. And it was like, man, I was working from 6 a.m. till probably 10, 11 o'clock at night. Okay. And I was driving all over, and I had 3 or 4 different jobs while trying to run my business. Right. Because I knew I could make money with my business, but I had to continue to dump back into it. Right. And, that was very difficult because, that situation, I love my wife. Situation could have gone way different. She might have been like, hey, like,
right,
this ain't
just
it.
taking too long for me.
This ain't it,
right.
But I think she saw the motivation and the drive in me. But it's definitely, I'll say this, it's definitely kind of hindered friendships. Okay. It's definitely hindered relationships with, I don't want to say like my relationships with my family are terrible. They could be a lot better, but I'm just...
You're so focused on doing what you got to do in order to keep the business afloat and make sure that your future and your family's future is 100%. Good. Right.
If it's Sunday afternoon and somebody who I've been trying to meet with that could potentially be a great mentor or somebody that I could do business with or whatever, if they call me and say, hey, Sunday, 4 o'clock, you be here. I'm going to be there at 3:30. Right. I'm going to show up. Right. I'm going to get the game, or I'm going to, we're going to handle business. We're going to make an agreement, whatever it is that we're doing. But, most people, especially like football season, right? Most people are like, hey, like let's go to the sports bar and get some wings and watch the football game, or you trying to go to the Falcons game, or like little things like that. It definitely puts me in a tough position. It's a friend, you might know KO. Right. He hits me up a lot of times and he'll be like, hey man, you want to go to this event? And I'm like, dang bro, like I really do. And I love KO to death, man. That's it. Great guy. I love that guy to death. Such a good dude. But I feel terrible because a lot of times he'll hit me up and I'm like, dang, bro, like I got like, business stuff or I got this meeting or I got this, like I can't make it. And sometimes it kind of, you sit in those moments. Sometimes you're like, man, like
You feel alone.
yeah, you do feel alone.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say you always hear the cliche is lonely at the top kind of thing. And not by any means am I at the top, but it's definitely a lot lonelier life than what you see portrayed. I say like on social media,
Right.
It's definitely different. It's a lot of sacrifice you got to make.
Tell us about a monthly breakdown of like your house expenses or whatnot, or just a monthly expense of.
So,
And the only reason I ask this is because like we were saying earlier, we know, you have to do what you got to do in order to maintain business and your lifestyle. But a lot of people may not understand how the lifestyle part may play a role along with the business or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So, just kind of give us like an overview of a monthly breakdown.
I say my monthly expenses are probably like 30 or 40 grand
Ooh.
a month. My mortgage initially was 2,400, but and I'll speak to this. This kind of goes back to your sacrifice situation. So I refinanced my house when the rates were really low. I originally had a 4.25% interest rate, and I refinanced it down to 2.25%.
Right.
Most people that I know that refinanced their house when the interest rates were low, they took money out.
Okay.
Home improvements, things like that. So I had a 30-year mortgage, refinanced my house, continued my payment, took, 15 years off my mortgage, or I guess 12 years off my mortgage, got a better interest rate, and now I'm paying my house off faster, which then becomes an asset that I can sell. So my mortgage is like $2,500. I pay $3,000 a month on it. I pay a little bit extra just to kind of pay off my principal and not get crushed on interest.
Right.
My car's probably like $1,700 or $2,000 a month. Okay. I think. I have my landscaping stuff, so because I'm busy with business, I don't have time to go out and mow the yard and keep up with my bushes and all that stuff. So I do my landscaping. I think it's like $560 a month to keep up with everything. Then you got all your utilities and your TV subscriptions and things like that. It's probably, $1,000, $1,500. Grocery, probably spend like $200-$300 a week on groceries. Groceries are high right now too. It's getting crazy. And then dinner. So like one thing Wednesday is my day that I don't do anything anymore. Okay. I do go to work on Wednesday or go into the office or whatever, or do some work stuff. But then I basically dedicate Wednesday nights to just me and my wife hanging out. Okay. To kind of, keep our relationship strong. Right. And like, I'm a big proponent of like continuing to date. Even though you're married, it's like you need to continue to date and continue to learn from each other and build as a team, as a unit. I buy clothes. Right. I buy shoes. And then, might go on a trip, hotels, flights, things like that. So I'd say on average it's probably about $30 a month.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So, all right. Because you've been saying you've been giving a lot of great information, a lot of practical great information. I want to talk to you a little bit about your mentorship and networking, right? Tell us, what are some ways that an individual, or matter of fact, what are some ways that you network?
Pretty much everything.
Right.
So
do you go to events and things?
I go to a ton of events, conferences. I'm also pretty involved with a couple foundations. Okay. So I do fundraising foundations. Great opportunity to meet people. I play golf. I just came from playing golf, so I was playing golf with a couple people. I'm also a member of the Braves, so I have season tickets with the Braves, and I opted. It didn't cost me anything extra, and a lot of people might not know this, but you can opt into a corporate membership. Wow. It doesn't cost you anything extra. Okay. And the Braves will, keep you up to date with all the events like we just did. We did the Minority Business Leadership Summit just a couple weeks ago, and it was basically about, their whole thing was holding the Braves accountable to doing business with minority-owned businesses, women, different ethnicities, things like that. super informative. I met some great people there. I mean, I met some professors from Penn State. I met some people with Delta. I met some people with some nonprofit organizations. Just things that like you might never know,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
you might call me and say, hey, I have a friend of mine, Spanish guy. He's looking to find access to capital for starting a business or whatever it is, and I might be like, oh, I met this guy at the leadership summit. I might be able to connect you and him.
Right.
And then that helps me build my relationship with him because
Right.
I connected y'all. Now we started to have a conversation. Then he's like, hey, I want you to meet this guy. Right. And I might meet that guy. And a lot of times I think, and this is where I had to shift my focus, is I would always look at like a mentor or a networking event or something where it's like, hey, something that you can do for me.
Right. Right.
And I completely shifted my focus and I'm like, hey, if I go to these events, then that helps me be able to do something for someone else. Okay. And then that's how I cast my net.
Gotcha.
Because I can sit here and it can be a what can you do for me type of situation. But then the way you build your network is by doing things for other people and being a resource, right? Because nobody wants a crab around. Somebody wants somebody who's giving something to the team. Correct. So like I kind of utilize that. I go to pretty much anything I can get my hands on.
Okay.
I go to anything. I go to trade shows, sneaker shows, healthcare networking events, software events. I do training. I mean, I go
just
everywhere.
wherever you can show your face and have a new individual that you can speak to.
100%.
Right. Yeah.
Relationships are everything.
Right. Okay. So tell us about the individual who makes this money. Who is he? Who is this person? And how attainable is it for this person to actually make the money? Tell us their qualities.
So I think it's definitely attainable. The biggest thing I'll say is integrity. Okay. Right? That is 100%, in my opinion, this is my opinion, that in order to achieve it and keep it, you have to have integrity. What I mean by that is if I message you on Facebook and I say, hey, I'm gonna come do this podcast and I'm gonna be there at 5:00, I'm gonna be there at 5:00. A little bit before, right? I'm going to make sure that I'm there. Now, I just drove from Milton after playing golf. Right. I've been up since whatever, but I made a commitment to you. And so in business, commitments are everything, right? Not everything is contract. Right. Everybody always kind of thinks contract. So like, if I don't have integrity, I'm not going to get far. Right. So that's the biggest thing. The other thing is character, right? How do I conduct myself? How do I do business, right? Because one thing my grandfather taught me when I was a little bit younger, it's always better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have any opportunities than to have a million opportunities and not be prepared, right? So I always try to show up and display my character and always, care about others, right? So that's the second thing. And I'll say the third thing is discipline. Okay. A lot of sacrifice. Right. You got to give up a lot of things. Right. Right. You might not be able to pay yourself 1 month. Right. But then that next month, just double up. Right. I mean, so there's always certain things, and I've got some really good mentors that have taught me a lot of things. And remaining calm in the storm. Okay. That's probably my biggest asset. And that comes from, just that discipline that goes back to the integrity and the character and taking care of myself and just being the best version of myself, because that's everything.
That's everything. Man, I appreciate you, James. You have dropped more than a boulder of information, of nuggets. Do you have any social media that you would like to share with the people, so that way maybe if anyone want to connect with you, network with you?
So, I have social media. Right. I'm not a big social media guy. Okay. But I have Instagram. It's inspire, 2 change, 23. Okay. And then I'm on Facebook, James May. If I don't know if they can see me on this, but if they can see a video of me, you know what I look like. And that's about it. I'm more of a face-to-face kind of guy, not too big on social media, but I'm there. So if anybody needs anything, or somebody can email me, or whatever,
Well, you want to give them your email?
Yeah, my email is mayjames23@gmail.com. And man, I'm always down to do whatever to help anybody that I can, because I wouldn't be here if someone didn't help me.
Well, would you like to be able to come back? Would you be able to come back on another date? You know, if we wanted to, talk to you more about some more financial literacy.
You tell me.
Yeah, we
I'm here,
glad to
man.
have you back, man.
Like I said,
you gave some
I
great
take
gems.
every single.
I like to ask a man first, but
I take every opportunity that I can get, because this gave me an opportunity to meet you, and
right.
Then we connect on Cologne.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you never know what that relationship could possibly do, and I try to cast my net as wide as I can everywhere I go.
Well, you guys heard it here. I appreciate James for coming out. You guys will be able to see this video within a week after everything is edited up and taken care of. But we'd like to say thanks for coming on out. And this is for our first episode of Modern Man Talks featuring James May.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, good deal.
Looking good, you caught my eye. Love your style, clean and precise. Cadell, Cadell, Cadell. A difference you can tell. Cadell, Cadell, Cadell. Style unparalleled. I love a Cadell man. You're really put together. I like that. I love a Cadell man. Cadell, Cadell, Cadell. I love a Kadeleproducts. Kadeleproducts. Modern products for the modern man.